I wouldn't believe this thing if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. The calendar. It changes. It knows. And when it chooses you, there's no escape. You just wait for the end. Or worse, what comes after.
The Apocalypse Calendar, a frightening discovery. The calendar wasn't supposed to exist. When Andrew Carter, a historian specializing in ancient civilizations, received a package with no return address, he assumed it was another eccentric collector sending him a curiosity. It wasn't the first time, but when he peeled back the layers of old parchment wrapping, his breath hitched. Inside was a book bound in cracked, black leather. The cover was smooth, almost unnatural to the touch, as if time had failed to leave its mark. There was no title, only a single embossed symbol, a circle split by jagged lines, reminiscent of an ancient sundial shattered by unseen forces. Andrew flipped it open, and a cascade of brittle pages whispered against his fingers. The ink was deep crimson, too dark to be mere aging pigment. His eyes traced the intricate text written in an archaic dialect he recognized instantly, Sumerian. This wasn't just old. This was prehistory. But what caught his attention wasn't the language. It was the dates. The book was a calendar, stretching far beyond the lifespan of any known civilization. It mapped out celestial movements, eclipses, and planetary alignments with disturbing precision. And then on the final pages, something changed. The entries weren't astronomical anymore. They were predictions. A city swallowed by the sea. A plague spreading from a single marketplace. A war ignited by an assassination that never should have happened. Each one was paired with a year, and each one had already occurred. Andrew's mouth ran dry. He flipped further. The world will end. A crossed-out annotation beside it read, "Error in calculation." The next entry was dated February 29th, 2025, just 2 weeks away. There was no description, only one word, written with a shaking hand. Correction. Andrew's stomach twisted. He rushed to cross-reference the book's past predictions, hoping to find errors, miscalculations, anything to disprove what he was seeing. But the entries were flawless. Every disaster, every collapse, every atrocity had played out exactly as foretold. His mind raced. If the book had been wrong before 2012, was it wrong again? Or had it simply adjusted? As he stared at the page, a faint sound echoed through his apartment. A soft knock at the door. His breath hitched. It was nearly midnight. Who the hell would be visiting now? Another knock. Insistent. Andrew hesitated, then closed the book, heart pounding. When he reached the door, he hesitated before peering through the peephole. No one was there. A chill spread across his spine as he slowly turned back, only to find the book open again on his desk. The pages fluttered, moving on their own, settling once more on the date, February 29th, 2025. And beneath the word correction, new text had appeared, scrawled in what looked disturbingly like fresh ink. Witness. The knock came again, this time from inside the apartment. Andrew froze. His pulse thundered in his ears as his eyes darted around the room. The apartment was silent now, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The knock had been unmistakable, though sharp, deliberate, and far too close. He grabbed the book, his fingers trembling as he slammed it shut. The leather felt colder now, almost icy, as if it were leaching the warmth from his hands. He shoved it into his satchel and slung the bag over his shoulder, his mind racing. He needed to get out, now. But as he turned toward the door, the knock came again, louder this time, reverberating through the walls. It wasn't coming from the door anymore. It was coming from the hallway. Andrew's breath quickened. He reached for the doorknob, but before he could turn it, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then they went out entirely, plunging the apartment into darkness. He fumbled for his phone, the screen's harsh light cutting through the black. The battery was at 85%, but the signal was gone. No bars, No Wi-Fi, just the cold, unblinking glow of the home screen. The knock came again, closer now. It wasn't just a knock anymore. It was a rhythm. 3 sharp raps, a pause, then 2 more. It sounded like code. Andrew's throat tightened. He knew that rhythm. It was the same pattern he'd seen in the book, etched into the margins of the final pages. He backed away from the door, his phone's light shaking in his hand. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, as if whatever was on the other side knew he was there, knew he was afraid. His back hit the wall and he flinched. The satchel slipped from his shoulder, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The book spilled out, its pages splaying open like the wings of a dead bird. The knocking stopped. For a moment, there was silence. Then, a sound that made Andrew's blood run cold, a low, guttural whisper, barely audible but unmistakable. It wasn't coming from the hallway. It was coming from the book. He didn't want to look. He didn't want to see. But his body moved on its own, his eyes drawn to the open pages. The ink was moving. It swirled and shifted, forming new words, new symbols, as if an invisible hand were writing in real time. The crimson ink glistened wetly, though it had been dry moments before. You cannot run, the book seemed to say. You are the witness. Andrew's vision blurred. His head spun. He stumbled toward the window, desperate for air, for escape. But as he reached for the latch, the glass fogged over, and a single word appeared, etched in condensation. Soon, the knocking returned, louder than ever, shaking the walls. Andrew turned, his back pressed against the window, and watched in horror as the door began to creak open. Beyond it, there was nothing but darkness, a void so deep it seemed to swallow the light from his phone. And from within that void, something moved. Something was coming. The next morning, Andrew's apartment was empty. The book was gone, as was his satchel. The only trace of him was a single sheet of paper on the desk, covered in frantic scribbles. At the top of the page was a date, February 29th, 2025. Beneath it, a single line of text written in a hand that wasn't Andrew's. The witness has been chosen. The correction begins. And in the corner of the page, a symbol, a circle split by jagged lines, like a sundial shattered by unseen forces. The calendar wasn't supposed to exist, but it did, and it was counting down. Andrew Carter was gone. The apartment remained untouched. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. Nothing missing except him. It was as if he had simply ceased to be. The police dismissed it as another missing persons case. One of many. A professor stressed out by his own research. Maybe. A quiet exit. Maybe even a suicide. But then, 3 days later, the book returned. A janitor at the university library found it in Andrew's office, lying open on his desk. Pages splayed wide like something had been violently torn from inside. The black leather binding, once pristine, was now frayed, as if something had clawed at it from within. Campus security logged the discovery, placed the book in storage, and filed a report. But nobody touched it. Nobody dared. Until Dr. Evelyn Grayson did. She was a linguist, an old friend of Andrew's, and the last person to receive an email from him before he vanished. It had been brief. Eve, I found something. I need you to see it. February 29th. If I disappear, you know where to look. And now, here it was, the book, waiting. She reached out, fingertips grazing the cold, leather-bound cover. A whisper of static pricked her skin. The moment she touched it, a deep, bone-vibrating silence settled over the room, like the world was holding its breath. Evelyn swallowed hard and flipped open the cover. The pages rustled, brittle and dry. There it was, the final entry, the one Andrew had feared. February 29th, 2025. But now, there was more. The ink had darkened, spreading like veins across the parchment. The handwriting wasn't ancient anymore. It was frantic, desperate, modern. It was Andrew's. Do not read aloud. Do not acknowledge them. If you hear knocking, it's already too late. Evelyn's pulse pounded. Her eyes skimmed further. The correction is not what we thought. It's not an event. It's not a prophecy. It's a purge, a reset. Every timeline, every civilization that has ever strayed too far, they erase it, rewrite it. This isn't the first time. Her breath hitched. They're watching me now. They know I understand. I hear them knocking. I see them in the dark. The final words weren't written. They were carved into the parchment, the grooves deep jagged. They are the hands of time. They are coming for me. And next, you. A sharp bang echoed through the empty office. Evelyn froze. The sound had come from the hallway. She forced herself to move, to turn her head slowly, so slowly. The hallway outside was dim, stretching into darkness. A shadow flickered at the far end. Not a person, something else. The lights flickered once, twice, and then, just like that, they went out. A pause. Then, knock, knock, knock. The same pattern Andrew had described. 3 sharp raps. A pause. Then 2 more. The temperature in the room plummeted. Evelyn's breath misted in front of her. She grabbed the book, slammed it shut, and backed away from the desk. The knocking grew louder, reverberating through the walls, the floor, inside her own skull. A whisper slid through the room. Witness. The door swung open. Beyond it, the hallway was gone. There was only blackness. Something moved within it, and then the book in Evelyn's hands burned with an icy fire. Her body locked up. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her limbs wouldn't obey. The darkness poured into the room, creeping toward her like ink spilled across reality. The book vibrated, pages flipping wildly on their own. A final line scrawled itself onto the parchment, written by no hand, spoken by no voice, yet they're all the same. Correction complete. The timeline resets. And then, nothing. The office was empty. The book was gone. Evelyn was never seen again. But 3 days later, the book returned, waiting for the next witness.